Right guys, we're going to do the inner bushings for the upper control arm on the E46 330. To be honest, this is one that's just come out of the other side. They don't seem bad. You can't really see a lot, but they weren't terribly flexible. The outers, on the other hand, which is more of a bearing, certainly are very floppy. But we've decided while we're in there, we're going to do absolutely everything. So, you know, bushings, you can either go and buy yourself a bushing, pushing kit, or as you can see what we're doing, you just make stuff up. And this is really largely just because we've been caught out in terms of time. Just learning yesterday afternoon that we actually have a race this coming weekend. In fact, we've got qualifying on Friday. This is now Sunday, and we've actually got a whole rear end of the car out and no poly bushes yet, waiting for them to be shipped. Hopefully tomorrow, Tuesday at the latest. So effectively what we've got is a piece of M12 threaded rod. I would have preferred high tensile rod. This was all we had. I can't get any high tensile today. I've been running around. So nut on the end. You really do need some thick washers. I started off just with this little round washer here. They're pretty chunky, but still, as you can see, it's belled. So it's good force that goes onto these babies. So I've actually put a secondary washer behind it as well. Then perfect piece of tube, just to make sure that the receiving end, we're going to push from the long end, but we do need to make sure that we can receive the whole bush. So as you can see, that bushing fits quite nicely inside that pipe. If you don't have a piece of pipe like this, it's actually your E46 standard exhaust pipe, so you can just cut a piece out and then you can solve that problem afterwards. So starting on that end, slide our bit of 40 something mil exhaust tube, make it up through the short side because we want to be pushing from the long side of this bushing. Chuck that away. Then I just measured up the bushing itself and then used a vernier micrometer just to check the socket which was closest to that. This baby has about 0.2 undersize. Could actually do with being a little bit smaller. This is a Jador 26. It actually does have an interference fit in the bore, which is not ideal, but it's not a problem. It just taps out once we're done. So that goes on there literally just to protect that rubber extension section over there and allow us to push perfectly on the edge of the bushing itself. As you can see from the bushing, there's really not a lot of material to play with. So if you go too small, you're going to be on the inside of the bushing, and that's the last thing you want, because then you effectively flare the bushing and you cause an outward force, which makes pushing very difficult. So this is kind of spot on. And another one of these big flat square washers on the back. Applied a bit of grease on there just to make sure that we don't have any more friction than is absolutely necessary. Right, so once it's nipped down, what you want to do is you want to make sure that all of your bits and pieces are perfectly aligned and centralized exactly where you want them. So your tube on this side, on the edges of the bushing, that feels great. That feels really good. And then on this side, my pushing socket, also nice and concentric. It also looks pretty darn good. Let's move slightly. There we go. Just nip that up. Great, so then what you need is a pair of 19s. I'm lucky enough to have a kind of a ratcheting 19 with a hole in the end. Because that's a bit of a pain in the bum. You can't get a ratchet on this long end. And if you're using a ring spanner, it's quite a bit of PT to keep on changing it. So I've got a ratchet with an open end, which slides on there quite nicely, and just an open or a ring spanner on the other side. Let's turn our ratchet around. Okay, and we'll just start getting some tension on here. Make sure we're nice and square. I'm not entirely happy that it's perfectly square on this side, to be honest. I just want to make that up a tad. That's better. Come on, baby. Yeah, happy with that. And we just start off real slow. You don't want to stress anything or force anything. If you feel the tension just building and building, that you start to feel uncomfortable. Remember, you know, what you're trying to do here is avoid stripping your rod. So you just got to feel it through. You want to go slowly, and you want to feel it start to move and give. If it doesn't, what I have seen guys doing on other YouTube vids is they give the control arm a couple of taps with a hammer. Makes me nervous. I don't like tapping on any casting, but I guess one can do that if you do get stuck. Our first one started to move very easily, and there we go. This one has as well. That's great. It started to go. So I'm not going to rush it. Just going to gently press and keep on pushing. Force is not terribly high. That's great. Right, so we've got that to the point where things started to get really nice and loose. So it seems like the bushing is right at the end of its run now. There we go. Okay, just pull that bushing off there. There we go, and there she is. So you can see the socket is actually stuck in there. There's a bit of an interference fit. I can give it a bit of a wiggle. It starts to come, but we will tap it out with a hammer. Alright guys, so I'm going to put the new bush in, and as you know, installation is the reverse of removal, but of course you want to see it happening. So again, remembering that the bush has got a long piece. Triple check this. You don't want to press this bush in the wrong direction and realize it's the wrong way around. So the long piece always points to the back of the vehicle. So make sure you've got your arms nicely aligned. So that's basically how we're going to come in. So I've got my rod with the two big fat washers on, exactly as I took it out previously. Exactly the same Jador 26mm socket to push on. Sits in there beautifully. You can see that fit is spot on. And actually it sits on the rubber, so it's kind of self-aligning. And we go there, just seat it. And then on this side here, we obviously don't need the full diameter of the old exhaust tube, the 40-odd-mil tube, because we're not pulling anything into it. So we're just going to use this deep socket. This is a King Tony 30. And that fits on there quite nicely. Another big fat washer. And last but not least, our nut. Okay, it's looking fine. Real good. Okay. Right, on with the show. See that immediately starts to move. It seats quite easily, and once it's gone in by a couple of millimeters, it starts to develop a bit of resistance, but nothing untoward, and you just keep on pulling. Right, and there she is. So you want to be making sure that your ends are pretty much flush. It looks like they've got probably 0.1, 0.05 over flush on either side. I'm not sure that makes a huge amount of difference. It's pretty much dead flush. Just make sure as you're pulling these in, just watch your bush all the way in, that you don't start to see any deformation on the edge being pressed. It is a very thin edge. It's really not a lot. So if you lose alignment on your socket at all, you could change the shape of this, and then you are going to have a bit of a problem. So yeah, but just watch it, pull it in nice and slowly, and you should be fine.